Hey, what's up guys? It's Rick with the Digital Divide, and today I want to talk about the Sega Dreamcast and give some recommendations. If you're just now getting into collecting the console, I want to provide a list of games that I think are absolute must-play games. Now, unfortunately, this was the last console that Sega ever released in the home market, and that still makes me so sad today because it was such an amazing piece of hardware, but Sega had made so many mistakes, specifically focusing on attachments like the 32X and the Sega CD. And although the Sega Saturn, I think, is a great system, they also botched that by releasing it at way too high of a price point and surprising retailers and pissing off a lot of software developers by not telling them they were going to surprise launch that console. It's just sad to me because Sega finally did everything right for once, but it was too late. People were fed up because they released so many pieces of hardware and then quickly abandoned them, so they had no expectation of continued support with the Dreamcast. They should have just went straight from the Genesis to the Sega Saturn to the Dreamcast, and the Saturn should have been priced a lot less than it was, and developers should have gotten adequate notice to produce games for that system. That's in the past. This isn't a retrospective video. This is just a suggestion on some amazing games that I think you should check out. And on that note, as always, I want to say this is completely subjective. These are my opinions. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, let's go ahead and get this one out of the way. The first game I want to talk about is Sonic Adventures. This is a classic launch title for the system. This game has been very divisive over the years. There are some people that don't like it and say it kind of plays itself for the most part, and there's a little bit of validity to that, but I think it's genuinely a good game, and I actually like it better than the sequel, despite not looking or running as good. But overall, I thought this was a really great first entry into the 3D world of Sonic. There's a lot of varied level design and collectibles to find. Next game I want to talk about is Ready to Rumble. Now, I'm not usually a fan of these types of games. I don't usually buy boxing games, but when I played this, I played the demo originally, and I immediately liked it. Because this doesn't take itself seriously. These are not real fighters. It's a more arcade-style game, so this is absolutely perfect to play with friends. And it really had a diverse cast of characters that were comical. Some of the stereotypes haven't aged well, but it's still a really good time. The next game I want to talk about is Giga Wing 2. This is a classic shooter, and it's so much fun. The game is kind of ridiculous because there's so much on screen at any given time that sometimes it's hard to see because there's just so much going on, but for the most part, this is really challenging and just amazing. I wasn't actually a huge fan of the first game, but this second one was so good. I think the transition into 3D helped me there personally, but I would highly recommend picking this one up if you are now collecting the Dreamcast. It's a lot of fun. Next game I want to talk about is Resident Evil Code Veronica, and this game I realize is also very divisive. It's with the power of the Dreamcast, a lot of people were hoping that Capcom would abandon the fixed perspective camera angles and, you know, the tank controls, you know, but they really stuck to that. And you know, unfortunately, they also stuck to the long and kind of obscene loading times. Whenever you open a door or walk down a set of stairs, there's a pause there. And despite how much faster the Dreamcast is than the PlayStation 1, you still had to cope with that, so it wasn't the generational leap some were looking for, but I think it's still very much worth picking up. The next game I want to talk about is Quake 3 Arena. This is a classic game and a great port of the PC version, and this game did support full online multiplayer. The visuals were really impressive for the Dreamcast at the time. It really stood toe-to-toe with the PC version of the game, as well as the PlayStation 2 version of the game, and I had so much fun playing this. And again, it did support, I believe it supported couch co-op split screen, and it also had full online play as well, so this was just a lot of fun. And there's a YouTube channel called Group M Pro that did a comparison of the Dreamcast version versus the PlayStation 2 version, versus the PC version. And then for some reason they also threw in what was essentially kind of a remake or remaster on the Xbox 360. That one is very, very different than the others, but when you compare the Dreamcast to the PlayStation 2 version specifically, it holds up quite well. And again, this was just so much fun. You can see all four of them running here. Now, if you didn't know, Sega released an official Dreamcast mouse and keyboard, and Quake supported both of those. Sega also had an official VGA adapter so that you could plug the Dreamcast into a CRT monitor. So my setup back in the day looked something like this. I legitimately had my Dreamcast hooked up to a monitor with a mouse and keyboard, and that's how I played Quake, and it looked incredible. The next game I want to talk about is Dead or Alive 2. This is one of those wow factor games. When it first came out, I was blown away by how good it looked. Up until this point, I had never seen anything that looked this good outside of the arcade, because you got to remember, Dreamcast was kind of the first next-generation console. Before that, it was like PlayStation 1, Sega Saturn, Nintendo 64, and then the Dreamcast came out, and it was miles ahead of those systems on a visual basis. Later on, the PlayStation 2 would come out, but for at least a year, this was the best thing that anyone had seen from a visual perspective, and it holds up today. And it's not just the visuals, the gameplay is amazing. This was just a terrific game through and through, and there's a YouTube channel called VC Decide that does great comparisons, and here you're seeing the Dreamcast and PlayStation 2 versions of the game, and the Dreamcast version actually looks much better. That is by far the superior version. It runs at a full 480p versus 480i, so it's not interlaced. The next game I want to talk about is Rayman 2: The Great Escape. This is just a classic 3D platformer in the vein of something like Mario 64. This game was so much fun, and eventually it got ported to pretty much every system on planet Earth, but the Dreamcast version is the one that I played, and the one that I finished to the end, and it was so much fun, and it was so colorful, and just had a really good time with this game when it came out. The next game I want to talk about is Trick Style. Now, this is one of those games that you either hate with a passion or you love. I liked it a lot because it was so unique, and it was kind of like a cyberpunk-themed racing game where you're in these futuristic cities and you're on hoverboards, kind of like Back to the Future style. You know, there are parts of the game where the frame rate isn't the best and the controls are also not as smooth as I'd like, but overall I thought it was really fun and had a really great soundtrack as well, and visually it just looked really interesting, so I played this game quite a bit. Next game I want to talk about is Grandia 2. This is one of the most incredible RPGs ever, and an absolute must if you have a Dreamcast and you're into RPGs. Now, the combat is traditional and turn-based, so if you're not into the old-school RPG tropes, then maybe this isn't for you, but for me, it's so good. You know, you slowly grow your cast of characters. They're all likable, the writing is great, the visuals have a great sense of variety to them. I think this is one of the best-looking games on the Dreamcast, and some of the boss designs, as we're seeing here, like with this giant eyeball creature, is just absolutely incredible. I mean, it's gross and disgusting and horror looking, and this was right up my alley as a teenager. So I really enjoyed this game and highly suggest that if you're into this style of game, you pick it up. Some of the spells are really cool, and the character artwork and design is just on another level, in my opinion. So this is definitely a must. And although most of the writing is text-based, there are some parts of the story that are completely voice-acted.
Just realizing that you were naive is half the battle, Elena. I guess I can't call you naive.
Right now, I want to forget everything. My mission to save the world, Valmar, myself as a sister of Granis. Tomorrow, well, right now, I want to forget a little.
The next game I want to talk about is Unreal Tournament. This was a great port of the PC version of the game. This one also supported the mouse and keyboard for the Dreamcast, and I had so much fun with this. I actually don't remember if this one supported online multiplayer, or I know that it had split screen because that's how I played it with my friends. I don't remember if it supported online multiplayer. I know Quake 3 did, but this game was just so much fun, and we played this for hours on end. I can't tell you how much I love this game. I played it on PC, I played it on Dreamcast, on PlayStation 2, just wherever it came out. I ultimately ended up picking up and playing it. And again, the amazing channel on YouTube called VC Decide did a side-by-side comparison, and you can see that it compares very, very favorably to the PlayStation 2 version, despite that console being technically far superior on a hardware level. This is just really impressive, and one of my favorite games on the platform. The next game I want to talk about is Metropolis Street Racer. This is probably my favorite racing game on the Dreamcast. This was made by Bizarre Creations. Unfortunately, that studio is no longer with us. They went out of business some time ago, but their racing games were always some of my favorites because they had a really good blend of hyper-realism mixed with just the right amount of arcade controls, and I had so much fun with this game on the Dreamcast. I think visually it was one of the more impressive games on that platform, so I had so much fun with this game.
All you have to do is tune in to the Night Train from midnight tonight.
There's a bullet in the gun. There's a fire in your heart.
Planet Perfecto, Bullet in the Gun. Available.
And as I mentioned, this was created by Bizarre Creations. They were based out of UK. Look, and their logo is so cool still, but they would go on to make the Project Gotham Racing series on the Xbox before going out of business, and those were amazing as well. The next game I want to talk about needs no introduction. It is Soul Calibur. Everyone knows this game. It is inarguably one of the best fighting games of all time on any platform, and the Dreamcast version was exceptional. This was one of the first times that I can remember where the console port of the game from the arcade was far superior. Visually, this was a massive leap over the arcade version, and probably one of the best launch games to ever come out on any system. It was so good. Next game I want to talk about is Hydro Thunder. This is an arcade-style racing game where you are racing on the water, kind of like Wave Race, but more exaggerated. This is not meant to be serious. The level designs were amazing. You're racing in the jungle, in the snow. You're, in the lava. You've got all these amazing, exaggerated, almost cartoonish levels, and I had so much fun with this game, and the sense of scale was super impressive. You would jump off of cliffs and you'd go like miles down, and I actually don't think the water looks as good as Wave Race, even though the Dreamcast was way more powerful than the N64, but it was serviceable and the gameplay was just a lot of fun. This is just I'm a sucker for arcade style games. Speaking of the arcade, the next game I want to talk about is House of the Dead 2, and the Dreamcast got an arcade-perfect port of this game. It ran at a rock-solid 60 frames per second, and it supported the Dreamcast light gun as well. The voice acting is absolutely horrible, but it's one of those games where the voice acting is so bad that it's good, kind of thing. You just laugh when you hear it, but the gameplay is rock solid. The graphics were, again, arcade perfect, and this was actually the very first game that I picked up when I bought a Dreamcast. The next game I want to talk about is Power Stone. This might be my favorite Dreamcast game. I love this game. It's a fighting game, but it's not like traditional fighting games. You play in a giant arena. Each level is a big arena that you can run around in 3 dimensions, and the character designs in this game were so unique and just beautiful looking, even today. And you run around in this arena and power-ups drop, like guns, swords, what have you. And as the name would imply, there are Power Stones, and if you collect 3 of them, then you turn into the ultimate form of the character that you're playing. and you're almost invincible at that point, almost. But this game is just beautiful. It ran at a rock solid 60 frames per second. It was so much fun to play with a friend. I really, really wish that they would port this game to modern platforms so that I can play it again. If I'm not mistaken, I think the only port it got was for the PlayStation Portable, I believe. But I'd really like to see it in 4K running at 60 frames per second, which maybe like a nice remaster would be incredible. Next game I want to talk about is Bomberman Online, and I know that Bomberman is an acquired taste. It's not for everyone. Some people think that the gameplay is too simplistic, and there is some merit to that, but you can't argue how much fun it is to get together with a giant group of people and just blow each other up. This game did support online multiplayer as well as couch co-op with 4 of your friends, and the gameplay is simplistic, and it's kind of stayed the same ever since Bomberman was created, but this version was great. It ran well. You know, they added some 3D elements, and you know, it's bright, it's colorful. It's just it's a good time to play. It's a good time waster if you just want to pick up and play for a few hours. Next game I want to talk about is Skies of Arcadia. This is an incredible RPG. For the Dreamcast, you play as a pirate, but instead of sailing the waters, you're flying around in the air on airships. And this game had some excellent writing, and the cast of characters were so likable. This was the first RPG that I played to completion on the Dreamcast, and there weren't many on the Dreamcast. It was mostly an arcade box, pretty much. I mean, I always look at the Dreamcast as like a arcade machine for your house, because all the games were kind of you know, short but super enjoyable and best played with friends. So there weren't a lot of very long Japanese-style RPGs for the system, but the ones that did come out on it, thankfully, were incredible, and this is one of those. It does have, you know, traditional turn-based combat, as most JRPGs have, so if you're not into that, this may not be for you, but if you do like that kind of game, this is going to be right up your alley. Next game I want to talk about is Crazy Taxi. This is another arcade-perfect port that came out to Dreamcast that had an incredible soundtrack that I unfortunately can't play for you here because my channel will immediately get a copyright strike. But this is just you know, another simple, fun Sega arcade game where you're driving people around on a giant map in an open world setting. This game ran at 60 frames per second, and again, soundtrack was on point, so definitely worth picking up for that alone if you have a Dreamcast. The next game I want to talk about is Marvel vs. Capcom 2. This is, without a doubt, my favorite entry in the series, and the Dreamcast got one of the best ports of this game. Again, arcade perfect. That was a trend for the Dreamcast, and I love that the backgrounds were rendered completely in 3D and at 60 frames per second, but the characters were still two-dimensional sprites with beautiful animation, and this game is just incredible. Today, again, my favorite Marvel vs. Capcom game, probably my favorite 2D Capcom fighter. And it was just a lot of fun, and the cast was so humongous as well. Last but certainly not least, I want to talk about Ikaruga. I probably butchered that name. This is a side-scrolling shooter and probably one of the best of all time. I know I say that a lot, but geez, this game is great. I mean, just look at the artistic design, the camera angles that 3D platform could afford them versus the old method of two-dimensional, you know, single-plane sprites was incredible. The art design in this game was absolutely stunning, and some of the camera angles are so cinematic, and the skyboxes they used were just super impressive. This game is an absolute must, in my opinion. If I'm not mistaken, I believe this was developed by Treasure, and they are known for making some really, really, really great games. So check this out if you're into this style of game. And guys, this video is getting really, really long, so I'm gonna call it quits here. As always, thank you for watching. If you somehow managed to make it to the very end of this video, then you are definitely a true fan of the channel, and leave me a comment below if you made it all the way to the end. Have a great day.